If you thought Terminator Salvation was bad, then wait till you see the Terminator movie with the subtitle that's spelled as if a 2-year-old got a hold of it. Terminator Genisys is the 5th movie in the Terminator series and is kind of a reboot of the series. It begins with narration from Kyle Reese, played by Jai Courtney, as it shows us images of Skynet wiping out humanity with a ton of nukes. And then we get into the future war where we see Kyle Reese meeting John Connor, and they fight until the final battle against Man and Machine. During that final battle, the Colorado portion of the Resistance takes out the Skynet CPU, but Skynet sent a Terminator back to 1984 in order to assassinate Sarah Connor before John Connor was born, similar to the first Terminator movie. So Kyle Reese volunteers to go back to 1984 to protect Sarah Connor, except when he gets there, things are different because Sarah Connor is how she was in Terminator 2 rather than Terminator 1, and the T-800 that was sent to kill her was destroyed by her and a reprogrammed T-800 that she refers to as Pops. This T-800 played again by Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's basically been looking after Sarah Connor since she was a little girl. And so their big plan is to stop Skynet and prevent Judgment Day from ever happening. The plot that we've had for 3 whole movies and a entire TV series. I am so sick of this goddamn plot for a Terminator movie. But the movie also has several plot twists and a lot of different things going on, which unfortunately were spoiled in the trailers. But even though I reviewed the second trailer and gave you my opinion of the big twist that trailer spoiled, I'm not going to do that in this review. I'm going to give you a completely spoiler-free review because I don't want to end up being the trailer or the poster. So if you've been following my channel and are a subscriber, you've noticed that I've been reviewing the Terminator movies in prep for this movie. And I've made it clear that Terminator 1 and 2 are some of my favorite movies of all time, especially 2. It's my favorite action movie of all time. Terminator 3 had its entertaining moments, but pulled an Alien 3 because of its story and basically shitting on what Terminator 2 accomplished. Terminator Salvation, I don't think is as bad as everyone says it is. I mean, it is a different movie, thank God, but it's very bland, generic, and should, by all means, have been better. Terminator Genisys, to me, I'm not going to waste any time building up my opinion, is what everyone told me Salvation was to them. Just an utter, irredeemable piece of shit. And I've never had to say that about any of the Terminator movies. Even looking back at Terminator 3, as much as the plot in Terminator 3 angered me, there was some things that I liked. At least I could say, well, it's definitely a very entertaining movie. Genisys is not even in the slightest. It doesn't even feel like a Terminator movie. It's just an utter disappointment. Let's get into your characters first. I already mentioned that Arnold Schwarzenegger is back as the T-800, but in terms of the newcomers, in terms of cast, we have Jason Clarke as John Connor, who I thought was really bad in this movie. He only has one speed throughout the movie, and it's just talking in a very mellow voice. Even when he's delivering his big speech that you see in the trailers to the Resistance, it just comes across as very laughable when you see it in the movie. And that might have to do with the director, but we'll get to that soon. Jai Courtney is Kyle Reese, which I thought... I don't hate Jai Courtney. He's not a good actor by any means, and I don't know why he's getting so much work, especially with these big franchises like Die Hard and Terminator. So here, as Kyle Reese, he's very bland, which for Jason Clarke I could probably excuse because we never had a really memorable representation of an adult John Connor, but for Kyle Reese and Sarah Connor, there's more expectation. And I just thought Jai Courtney was so miscast in the movie. When you look at Michael Biehn in the first Terminator movie, he was charismatic, and he was also scrawny looking, something that I didn't really notice until watching the first Terminator again in prep for the review, is that he's very scrawny looking, which makes sense since he was born after the war. He wouldn't really be able to get buff, but he has that human spirit that allows him to keep on fighting. Jai Courtney looks very buff, and he has the personality of a Terminator. I mean, he'd probably be better off being a Terminator than being Kyle Reese. Emilia Clarke, who is Daenerys from Game of Thrones, plays Sarah Connor, and out of all the actors, she along with Schwarzenegger are the two decent ones. Well, okay, there's a third one, but I'll get to him later. For Sarah Connor, she does a decent job with crappy material, and there are parts where I did kind of like her, but unfortunately she lacks the will and authority that Linda Hamilton brought to that character, especially when you watch Terminator 2. Now, we also have J.K. Simmons as a cop in this movie, and he's kind of wasted. I mean, he is decent in the movie, and it's always nice to see J.K. Simmons in anything, even in something as shitty as this. But really, he had no purpose in the movie at all. Like, he doesn't really do anything. And also who's wasted is Matt Smith, from one of the previous incarnations of Doctor Who. He's in this movie for about 3 minutes. And that wouldn't really bother me, except it's Doctor Who, and before the first trailer came out, there were promo images that showcased his character. And then after that, we just didn't see anything of him at all. And once you see his role in the movie and who he's playing, you're like, oh, well, that's some shit right there. Honestly, I can't blame these actors. I know a lot of people want to take a jab at Jai Courtney because of A Good Day to Die Hard, but the blame lies on Alan Taylor. This is the same guy who directed Thor: The Dark World, which I saw it for a second time in prep for Age of Ultron, and I actually liked it a little better than I did before. But that movie had a lot of interferences. Marvel interfered with a lot of his decisions. They had to bring in Joss Whedon to write in some new lines to practically save the movie. And so I thought, okay, Marvel shouldn't really interfere with their directors. But after seeing this movie, I'm like, no, Marvel actually tried to save Thor: The Dark World, because Alan Taylor is not a good director at all. I mean, he's passable with Game of Thrones, but in all honesty to me, all of the Game of Thrones episodes have the same feeling. So no director on that show has their own style. And Alan Taylor he's really proven himself to be a terrible director, I think. He doesn't really work that well with actors. When he has someone speak in a very commanding voice, like John Connor here or Odin in Thor: The Dark World, it comes off as laughable. And the action scenes are boring as shit in this movie. There is not one action set piece in this movie that's memorable. Probably the best one is when the older Arnold Schwarzenegger is fighting the younger Arnold Schwarzenegger, but unfortunately it's filmed very close up, as with a lot of the action scenes in here, and you can't tell what's going on, which, even if you're someone who hates Terminator Salvation, you gotta give it to McG that when he filmed the action scenes, he filmed it from a distance so you could see everything that's going on. He doesn't shove the camera into the action so you can't make out anything. And it doesn't help that the movie has a terrible script. I mean, I'm not really that surprised, since one of the writers here is Patrick Lussier, who directed My Bloody Valentine, Dracula 2000, just a bunch of bullshit, and Drive Angry. Because the script is so crappy. It's very convoluted, filled with many inconsistencies, huge plot holes that, again, I want to say, but they're spoilers, so I really can't. But when you watch the movie, it'll make sense that the script is really not all there. And also, one thing that I have to say about this movie, I can't tell whether this thing's trying to be a reboot or it's trying to retcon the Terminator movies that we don't like. Because there are parts in this movie that are a shot-for-shot remake of the first Terminator movie. It is pathetic to watch them remake these scenes and have these extras deliver lines straight from that first movie and have them come across as bad actors. It just made me cringe. Anytime a movie does something that reminds me of the remake of Psycho, that's not a good sign at all. But, okay, I've bitched enough. I have bitched about this movie enough. Was there anything I like about it? Because I went in this movie wanting to like it. I wasn't that excited for it, but I wanted to go in, and if I wasn't going to like it, I wanted to find something that I liked. And I did find some things that I liked. As I mentioned, Arnold Schwarzenegger is back as the T-800 after leaving the franchise with 3 to be the Governator. So here, he's actually pretty decent. He's good. I'll say that, he's good. He reminds us why he embodies that character. And I actually liked him here better than I did in Terminator 3. Because here, he actually took action. In Terminator 3, he really didn't really listen to anybody else. And you can watch my whole Terminator 3 review for that. He's still not as good as he was in 1 or 2, but he is better here than he is in 3. And I mentioned Emilia Clarke is decent as Sarah Connor. Another thing I liked was that the future scenes are done pretty well, I think. They're better than the ones in Terminator 3, where that movie just had very generic sound effects. Here, the sound effects, there are some generic sound effects, but most of the time, they hit hard and have an impact. It almost reminds you of the flashback scenes from the first 2 Terminator movies. But that's pretty much all I can say, because in the long run, when I walked out of this movie, I didn't feel angry about it. I didn't walk out going, man, I can't believe that was an utter piece of shit. I was not pissed off. I walked out going, yeah, I kind of knew it was going to be this way. I didn't really have much hope for this movie, so I just say don't waste your money. But as I started walking over here, back to my house, and started writing notes for this review, I thought about my love for the first 2 movies, and the way the franchise has kind of de-evolved. It's so frustrating and upsetting that the series just went on such a downward slope. And this is another indication that the Terminator series is similar to the Alien series. Both franchises began with 2 cinematic masterpieces, with a 3rd movie that shat on everything that the second movie built upon, and by the time you get to the 5th movie, it's a total wreck. It's unsalvageable. This is the Alien vs. Predator of the Terminator movies. And even though I wasn't really angry at the movie, just on the basis that it had to follow 2 cinematic masterpieces that were more intellectual and better than the average genre movies that were coming out at those times, I gotta tell Terminator Genisys to go burn in hell. And it actually honestly makes me sad, because I've never said I hated an actual Terminator movie until this one. But I gotta go with my guts, I gotta go with my feelings, and I gotta go on what I just said about the first 2 movies. So this movie's gonna make my bottom 10 list. It's not the worst movie I've seen, but it is pretty shitty. And that's my review for Terminator Genisys. And if you're wondering if they ever explain why Genisys is spelled the way it's spelled, they don't. They gloss over that completely. Don't even mention it, as they pretty much do with everything else in this movie. Now, before I go, I have an announcement to make. Exciting announcement. I will be doing a Terminator Genisys spoiler review, because there's a lot in this movie that I want to cover that I couldn't in this review. But I will be doing that review with Ryan Wright of The Real Rejects. If you don't know what The Real Rejects is, this is a YouTube channel that specializes in reaction videos where Ryan Wright and a guest watch a movie trailer, a movie clip, a video game clip, a Vine, any kind of viral video out there, or trailer at all, and react to it and give their thoughts on it. He also does movie reviews. I think he's one of the most entertaining YouTubers out there. His videos are really funny, really great. So I recently reached out to him and asked, hey, I love your work. How do you feel about doing a collaboration video? We could do a spoiler review for Terminator Genisys. And he said yes. So you can find our spoiler review for Terminator Genisys on The Real Rejects, not on this channel. And I will post a link to that once the video goes up. So if you haven't seen The Real Rejects, I suggest you go over there, subscribe, watch their videos, and tell them the real Mr. Robinson sent you. So until then, leave a comment and tell me what you thought of Terminator Genisys. If you've seen it, what did you think? Like, subscribe, share me with your friends. And this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there is only one.